You're listening to Start Again with Shauna Lee, the place where you will be reminded that it's never too late and you're never too old to do the damn thing. So stick around if you're ready to vibe higher and be inspired to chase your dreams. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode where I am again introducing you to a new internet friend. Today, Guy Morris is joining us. He is an author, researcher, presenter, and business leader. Listen, this guy has a wide background that includes, let me read this off for you, multiple degrees in economics, finance, and computer science, which led him to a successful career in tech and software Fortune 500 companies. But he also has written songs for Disney Records. He's recorded multiple CDs, and he's written 3 books. He also is the founder of a nonprofit association called Author Event Network, and we are going to dive into all of this today. Guy, thank you so much for being here.
Shauna, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. I am fascinated by people, and you have given us lots to talk about. So I will let you decide where we start.
I do my best.
Yeah, with this question that I like to ask, which is, how have you embraced this idea of starting again?
I like to call it the third act career. One person told me years ago, they said retirement just means putting on a new set of tires and starting over. And I liked that because the idea of boredom for me is probably the most evil of all luxuries of wealth. And I never wanted that. I learned to love to learn in college, and I've been absorbing things ever since. And so I got tired for sure of the corporate
Sure.
pace, the 80 plus hour weeks, constant meetings that don't really say anything other than, everybody's saying the same thing,
Yes.
and the constant push. And I've made companies billions of dollars over the years. So it wasn't about trying to prove that I could
Yeah.
do it anymore. And but I wanted to find something that was meaningful to do when I stopped trying to run the race. And I've been very happy with it. Yeah, it's been rewarding. It keeps me intellectually stimulated. I do gobs of research for each book, which makes me. I can't write something interesting unless I'm learning something interesting.
Yes.
Is my
Yes.
philosophy. And so it's given me a new skill to develop. It's given me new ways of interacting with people. It's been the ability to go out and do all the research, from the travel to the intellectual, to having conversations with physicists and AI architects and politicians and pastors. It's been a really interesting, fun change for me, and I'm loving it.
That,
This is I wanted, my goal was to do something that I could do well until I can't do anything at
yes.
all.
Yes. I love it. I love it. Well, tell us a little bit about your books. So you've written 3 and you're working on a couple more.
I've written 3. The first one that I wrote actually took me 12. I started researching it during my career. It took me about 12 years on and off to do the research into the history, archaeology, and mythology that went into the book. And then the next 2 deal with artificial intelligence and how it's going to affect the world in society, politics, religion, national security, weapons development, those types of things.
Yes.
And all of them inspired by true stories, deep research, or personal experiences, and a combination of all of the above. The first story, The Curse of Cortez, was really was evolved out of, when my son was about 12, 11, 12. We used to go to the library. He was a big reader. So I was a single parent. I didn't get a chance to date a lot because I didn't really want to leave him at home. And so I had some time, so I wrote him a short story. And so the Curse of Cortez kind of evolved out of a follow up to that story, where I really wanted the story based on something historically true, because I wanted him to not only read a good story, but I wanted him to learn to look for the true history and get really the best
Yeah.
stories. And so I started researching, and I stumbled onto a story that just fascinated me to no end. It dealt with the true billion-dollar abandoned plunder of Henry Morgan, that went missing with 600 souls and three ships. Why Morgan went insane and burned his logbooks to keep the world from knowing why he would abandon $1 billion, and how after 12 years that insanity connected me to events that led all the way back to the origins of the Mayan creation myth. It's got humor, romance, paranormal, adventure, history, archaeology. It was a super fun book to
Wow.
write. Mainly a super fun book to
Yeah.
research. And but that inspired me. But having written that book, by the time I finished doing the research, my son was long gone. He didn't need a young adult book anymore. So it became a little bit more sophisticated, which was a lot more fun as well. And then the other two books deal with artificial intelligence in political, religious, and national security issues. That one evolved, or that one was inspired when I was still in my career. My career involved implementing multiple stages of new
Mm.
technologies. I was always on the leading edge, and one of those was early stage AI, and so I was pretty familiar with what technology could do when I discovered, somewhat by accident, that a program had escaped the NSA spy labs at San Diego.
Oh,
Wasn't lost, wasn't stolen, wasn't broken. A spy program escaped the NSA. When I figured out, and again, I get this obsessive mode in my head where I've got to figure it out. And so when I figured out how a spy program could escape the NSA and why they would want to design it that way, they sent two FBI agents to my door.
hey.
So they were pretty upset that I had figured out something they thought was supposed to be top secret. I was giddy. They didn't know what to do with my snarky attitude. I was, yes, yes, I did it. I figured it out. Oh man, this is so cool. I'm so glad you're here. Oh, come on, boys, admit it. You wouldn't be here if I was wrong. I'm going to tell all my friends. So after they were
I'm
not
sure.
happy. So after I got the "We are not amused" speech from them, my wife came home and I got the "What did I do" speech from her. And but ultimately, I decided that this was such a great experience. I had to put it into a book, and so that became the series. Now, The Swarm won the Reader's Favorite Gold Award. The follow-up book to it, The Last Ark, won the Silver Award. The Curse of Cortez was listed on BookTrib, which is Barnes and Noble favorite 25 books of 2021. They called it Indiana Jones meets Da Vinci Code.
Okay.
Um, so I'm off to a good
Yes.
start. I'm not, my sales are better than half of the authors on Penguin Random House, and so I feel like I'm doing pretty
Yeah.
good there. But I'm doing better every year. So every year my sales have been
Oh my
growing,
gosh.
which
Okay.
is pretty
So
good.
I am not a thriller writer and I've read a few. So I'm venturing out to have some comments on this genre. However, I can totally resonate and connect with the fact that I also started writing because I wrote a story for my son. And it nothing
Yeah.
ever happened with that story, other than I read it to him from memory night after night when he was a wee little boy. But it got the engine running for me. And so it
hmm
sounds like that's similar for your story, which I love.
It did, and I was a songwriter, but that's a different
Yep.
audience and different age groups and dynamics to really do anything with. It's not something I was going to really get into as a
Yeah.
retiree as much, and so this really gave me something meatier to work on that
Oh, sure.
I've really relished. And as it turns out, there's a lot of real deep philosophical, social, political, religious issues that are coming up out of this. And it allows me to deal with those issues in a narrative form rather than a nonfiction
Yep.
form, which for me makes it less preachy,
Yep.
makes it less. Um, I've got something to teach people as much as let's explore these ideas
Yeah.
together. And I like to liken it to how Michael Crichton used Jurassic Park to make negative comments about our ability and desire to manipulate DNA to recreate things and clone
Yes.
things. And bringing out, I mean, there was a lot of discussion about the ethics involved in that practice before the movie, but it wasn't until after the movie that it became sort of a common thought
Right.
process. It was more on the mind of the normal person, and I think I'm wanting to do that a little bit with artificial
Yeah,
intelligence.
it sounds like it.
AI has tremendous power to change the world. Also has some tremendous risks that we're not fully addressing,
Yep.
and that's a problem.
Yeah, and you said before we started recording that you were also writing the next two books. Do you want to give us a little?
I'm working on the next two books. One will be a follow-on for the third book in the AI series, which I call the Snow Chronicles. Snow stands for SpyNet Online, and that one will be called The Image. That's going to deal more specifically with the issues of AI developing consciousness, the technologies, a little bit of the technologies involved in that, but also some of the implications of from governments as to how they would respond to an AI that's conscious, and what that could mean, how that kind of might be changing some of the things we're at. And one of the other, I think, stranger things, I say stranger, certainly unusual things that I've done in the series that you won't see in too many AI novels, is I've given the AI the ability to decode end time prophecy,
Uh,
which allows it to bring in a lot of um, the conceptual issues around climate and wealth disparity and some of the larger issues in life, the social unrest that we're seeing, and tie it to the question of are we on the track to basically destroy ourselves, and how does this relate to not only biblical prophecy, but does it relate to other prophetic traditions from Islam, the Hopi, the Hindu, and are we? Is there a mathematical correlation around those things that we should be paying attention to? Now, the AI is not religious; it's not dogmatic. So we strip away the topics of dogma. We strip away the biases of Protestants blaming the
mm,
Catholics, and the Christians blaming the Muslims, and the left blaming the right, and or the right blaming the
yeah,
left.
yeah,
We get away from all that kind of stuff, and we really get into what are some of the factual things that have been occurring in the last generation that are unique to all of history. How do those correlate to what was told, how things would change in history, and is there a from a scientific perspective, is there a causality factor in that? And from a religious perspective, is there a set of choices that we're all being asked to make, right?
yeah.
On a personal level. So it really tries to get into some deeper issues. So it's more than just a thriller. I really try to deal with a lot of social issues in the
Oh, well,
books.
it certainly sounds that way. And I always think it's interesting when we bring something of a spiritual or religious nature with scientifically backed data. And it
Hmm.
becomes a very interesting conversation when you are combining this logical, analytical way of thinking to something that is much more based in emotions and traditions than anything else. So it's an interesting world you have created.
Yeah. So the next book will deal with some of those higher level of issues of consciousness, multiple dimensions, CERN experiments dealing with proving a fifth dimension, and if so, what does that apply in terms of studies of spiritual studies, paranormal, UAPs. So it tries to look at some of these things. Both the premise for me is that science tries to look at the what and the how, whereas religions in general try to look at the who and the why. And then that religion is not necessarily the essence of what the truth is, because faith is always an individual experience, always an individual quantum experience. Religions oftentimes try to institutionalize those belief systems, but they can't institutionalize the experience of faith. And so that's where we get into problems, which is where religions become corrupt, even though the core people, there are people in there that are core, are
Yeah,
faithful. And so I'm trying to kind of distinguish between some of those things as we're looking at what we're doing to
yeah, yeah.
ourselves. So it's been good. And then the second book that I'm working on, I've written about 4 or 5 chapters, I think 5 chapters, and a book outline. I need to start shopping it soon. Is the outline for a nonfiction book, a proposal for a nonfiction book called Humanity in an AI Tsunami, a Survival Guide. And it's going to look at how AI kind of works at a really fundamental level for people to understand. And then what are some of the changes in AI, the types of AI, the use cases of AI, the risks of AI, and what we should be doing to regulate and control this technology, and what can individuals and small businesses do to prepare for this AI tsunami that's coming, and it's inevitable.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to, that'll be sort of a nonfiction book, really geared towards consumers, small businesses, people who aren't AI experts, who don't want to feel ignorant when the topic comes
Yeah.
up, but also don't want to feel afraid.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a good subset of the population who still is under the assumption that we might be able to avoid it. And so I like that you are taking the more pragmatic approach of it's coming. Let's figure out how to deal best with it.
Well, I'm also a thriller writer, so I have to stress that we
Yeah,
might.
yeah,
But yeah, there are some major issues, and it does deal with I mean, one of the things that we have that we can be in control of is our vote, and electing politicians that will put some guardrails on this before it's too late. But even with the guardrails, we're dealing with a massive economic social shift in society that we're not really prepared for as a society, and certainly many individuals are not. So I'm trying to help people be aware of what those things are and what they can do to be better. And one of the things I tell people is embrace the
yeah,
technology. Don't be afraid of
yeah.
it.
Well, and I think it speaks to a lot of this, but what do you think has surprised you most about this journey to becoming an author?
I think that what surprised me the most, well, I think two things I would say. How much work it was to transition between, because I've been writing my whole life. I've been in business, but I've been writing PowerPoints and executive briefs and
Yep.
policy statements and, you know, book, or business proposals and contracts and blah, blah, blah. Boring, boring, boring. Um, Learning how to develop it was a new skill that I had to develop to learn how to turn what I knew into a great narrative. Something that would win awards,
Yes.
something where people would read the book and weeks later say, I'm still thinking about it.
Yeah.
And that I had to retrain. And so when I first wrote The Curse of Cortez, I had a draft of The Curse of Cortez that I thought was pretty close to the story I thought I wanted. I hired a very expensive, and this when I was still at Microsoft and I had the money, um, developmental editor, and I asked her. I said, "I need you to come in, and I need you to. I think I've got a great story here. It's took me years of researching to get the information in this. It's really a mesmerizing tale, but I need your help. I need to make this into a great read." And so rip it up, tear it apart, tell me everything I'm doing wrong, everything I need to be doing differently. Have no mercy. I've got a thick skin. Go for
Wow.
it. God
That's really
bless her.
brave.
God bless her. 4 months later, she comes back and 44 single space typewritten notes of classes I needed to take, books I needed to read, things I didn't
Yeah.
understand that I needed to understand, things I needed to stop doing, things I needed to start doing,
Oh,
things I needed to consider, things I missed entirely. Oh, and you've got some really great bones here. You have the bones of a great story
uh-huh.
here, but
Uh-huh.
and there was a lot of buts. And then every page of the
Yes.
manuscript had a note, at least one or two or three or four notes. And I first got her package back, and I was reading over it, and my first thought was, "Oh Lord, have mercy, I suck." What am I gonna
Yeah.
do? Now? What am I gonna do? I said, I think I'll have to go back to maybe considering being a boat captain or something for my retirement. What am I gonna do
Yeah.
now? Well, but then after licking my wounds for a few days, I thought, well, she did exactly what I asked her to do. Um,
I know. And yet, like,
and so I thanked her,
wow.
and I spent the next year and a half trying to apply what she taught me, including taking several other classes, including master classes from Dan Brown and Dave Balducci and others. reading several books, and so it was a masterclass for me. It was basically sending me to school,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
that was, I think, one of the best. That was one of the surprising things I had to learn as to how much I had to learn about it.
Yeah.
Because I thought I had a
Yes.
generally good idea of what a good story was, but I apparently I missed it quite a bit. And I think
Yeah.
the second surprising thing, and this is true, I think, for many, 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 many authors, which is writing an excellent, incredible book is the easy part. Then you've got to find an audience, market, promote, and
Yep.
get attention when there's 100,000 books produced every year. That has
Yeah.
been the steeper learning curve that I'm still on. And
Yeah.
one of the things I found, at least for me, that I can control, and the part of the frustration for me is that I'm a business guy. So if I'm spending money on promotions, unless I'm getting it's hard for me to. My sales aren't big enough where I can spend money on promotions and not care if I get a rate of return on it. But when you're a
Right.
small author, if you're spending $100 or $1,000 on a promotion, you need to get $1,000 back in royalties in order to do it again. Otherwise, it becomes
Yep.
unsustainable. You can't keep throwing money away that you're
Yep.
not going to earn back. And so
Yeah.
that was one of the reasons I formed the Author Event Network. Was I?
Listen, you're just segueing into my next question all by yourself.
Yeah.
This is great. I was going to ask about AEN and tell us, what inspired you to start it. And listen, you're already going there.
AEN grew out of the need to figure out how to sell more books, especially since my first book released during the pandemic. So my first book
Ah,
released
yes.
November 2020. And so nothing, I was getting decent sales, several $100s of sales the first year. I thought, and I did a couple of Barnes and Noble book signings that went really well. I sold out all the books they had they had bought for the store. Um, but I thought that's great. I want to do this again. And they said, well, we'd love to have you back. Write another book and come back when you have your next book. I said, no, I'm talking about doing it
I,
again next week, next month. So I actually stumbled onto a guy because they were doing interviews on the local public access station here in Kitsap. And he went to a festival every year called the Blackberry Festival, and they set up a booth. He belonged to a small author group, and they set up a booth and they sold books at the festival. And I realized that was the same thing. I went to the LA Times Festival of Books, and it was the same thing. Except the difference was when I went to the LA Times Festival of Books, I sold okay, not great. It was a post. It was like 21, so it was post COVID. It wasn't People weren't really out yet. But what I really looked at was I said, there's 200 tents here, and there's got to be at least 10,000 books at this event. I'm a book lover and I'm overwhelmed. I can't imagine
mm,
how it's going to be for people just to wander by and just happen to wander by into my tent, our tent, and then happen to wander with all authors in that tent just happen to like. I said it's really hard to sell in that kind of hyper competitive, saturated market. Well, then I went to a festival like the Blackberry, and there was your typical festival stuff. There was T-shirts and serapes and hats and jewelry and somebody doing honey and somebody doing spices and somebody doing, back massagers and somebody trying. There was T-shirts and all kind makeup and toys, but there weren't any literary. So when they were doing Blackberry, they were the only ones where they had authors in the booth signing books. Well, that group didn't really want to grow very much, and I knew that there was an opportunity to grow more. So I formed the AEN, and that's what we do. We basically, we have, there's a process to get in. We don't accept just anybody, and so you have to be a quality author to begin with. And we go to festivals, fairs, and events all over the Seattle and Portland area. We have two chapters now, about 55 authors, and we are busy every single weekend throughout the summer season when these events are going on at one event or sometimes more than one event around the city. We'll have tents in two or three different events. And we'll get between 1 to 2 booths, which is the max they'll allow us. And we'll fit as many authors in as we can, typically about 3 authors per every booth. So, about if we have a double booth, 6 authors and a couple on the side. And They do well. We find new readers. We grow our read lists. We sell books at the maximum number of profits. We get to take pictures with our readers. They get to take pictures with their new authors. I've met authors coming back. They said, "I bought a book from you last year. I loved it." And I say, "Well, I've got two more." And they say, "I want both." It's been a great way of building readership and building repeat readership, and that's become my most profitable channel. It is very busy. It is hard work. I tell
Yeah.
everybody we're the hardest working authors I know. Um, but when half of the authors on Penguin Random House sell less than 12 books a month, I can say that every single author that's active in my group is doing better than that. And so,
Yeah. Well, listen, you're hitting on one of the things that I discovered as a new author, which is it's one thing to write the book, it's quite another to sell it.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yes. Yes.
And I also read that most authors don't make a lot of money until they have a read list of 3 to 5 or more books. And so part of
Yeah.
my goal has been to not focus on spending a lot of money on promotion unless I'm getting return, but focus more on producing more high quality books and get that read
Yeah.
list up. And so as I said, I've got 3 right now. I'm looking trying to get to the magical 5 or more, and that'll but that'll come soon enough. But in the
Yeah.
meantime, I want to make money, and I want to the money I spend on going to these events. I always come home with more money in my pocket than it cost me, and
Yeah.
that includes the
Well,
cost of books and everything.
I think anybody coming out of the business world is always looking at ROI, right? Like if okay, I'm going to spend some money to sell some books, I want to make sure I'm making a profit here. And what does that
Yeah,
return on my investment actually look like? So that's awesome that you're able to do that.
yeah. So that's what AEN is. It's very popular. We're actually having to turn away some authors now because we're keeping the quality standards high. And that'll be this summer. So the only downside is that I'm so busy out selling and signing books that it really does cut into my time to research and write books. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
my writing does slow down in the summer, and that's the only downside.
Listen, it's like anything I've discovered in life. You get you get 3 steps into the thing that you want to do and you realize you're so damn busy that you're not actually doing the thing you wanted to do to begin with.
Well,
But if it's
but you got to
if
do
it's
both.
like
You got to do both.
yeah, yeah. Well, what I've discovered though is at least I'm enjoying the ride. So when we kind of look backwards at your life up till this point, what advice would you give the younger you?
Oh, you know, wow. The younger me was a very messed up individual. I had been a homeless runaway at 13. So the younger me, even though I'd finally gone to college and earned multiple degrees and got scholarships and everything else, there was a part of me that carried post traumatic stress most of my life. So I think if I were to, but I didn't, nobody knew what that was at the time. It's hard to deal with something when psychologists are all pointing in the wrong direction. I think the younger me, I'd say, focus on the things that really make you a better person rather than the things that you think that people will be impressed with. And I
Yes.
think that would have I would have become a lot more introverted and in some senses, but I would have focused more on some of these things like writing and creating and growing
Yeah.
than I did. I went diving and sailing and adventures and bike races in Mexico and exploring ruins in Cancun. Now, all that stuff led to great experiences that ultimately go into my books. But there's also I was wasting a lot of time just kind of chasing things as well. And I'd say chase
Yeah.
fewer things, but chase the ones you want that are most important. Chase them well. Just
Yeah.
do few things, but do them well.
Yeah. That's good. That's really good. I love that. That's one of my favorite questions I ask everyone who comes on the show because the answers are all so varied, but the same themes kind of flow through all of the answers, which I just love to see how different and unique the answers are. And yet they're all sort of saying the same thing, which is amazing. Um, well, so that's like looking backwards. You look forward and you think about what's coming next or what you're planning to do. What do you now believe is possible for your life?
Well, possible. I think it's possible that I will get to a bestseller status with one of my books. I've been certainly getting a lot of kudos and rewards. If I can continue to get the marketing out, and I think as people become more and more aware of AI, I think the books are resonating with them. And then I want to do more travel. I mean, I loved traveling when I was at work, but it's ironic that when I had the time the money to do as much travel as I would want, I was so busy at work that you can't do it. Now that I've got more of the time, the money is more restrictive. But it's as this my third act is really kind of gaining traction and gaining steam. Not only is the travel something I love to do, but it's incredible research. For example, the next book, I went to Italy this past year, and half of
Mm,
the book is based in Italy. so,
yeah.
because, well, why not? I've got all these great new locations and things to learn and places to go and
Oh,
history to
sure.
talk about. So let's put that in the book. So I think that the future for me is going to be continuing to write. And as I said, I'm hoping now that I have something I can do. I can write until I can't do anything else anymore. And part
Yeah.
of writing is continue to experience and learn. And so that really says travel and learn more and keep learning. Being an author is a wonderful way of synthesizing the world into a narrative that you're hoping is going to help people turn the page and really enjoy it and pull something out of the characters and the story that they can apply to their own life. And that's a even without the money, that's a worthy endeavor if you're saying
A
something meaningful.
100%. Yes. Couldn't agree more. Well, my last question for you
Mhm.
is how can people find you and your books?
The easiest way to get started is to go to guymorrisbooks.com. There's trailers, there's descriptions of each book. I've got fact versus fiction pages that apparently got taken off during my last edit, but I got to put those on this week. There's review highlights and links to reviews. There's my media kit and expert reels. There's all kinds of information. You can link to buy on Amazon, Barnes and Noble online. Kobo, Drafted Digital, a bunch of other places. So it's a great place to get started. If you want to go to my social media, I'm at official Guy Morris Books on Facebook. But yeah, those are you can touch base with me, and if people want to talk about the books, I'm always happy to respond. If people want to tell me
Fabulous.
cryptocurrencies, probably not. Um,
Well, that's awesome. I will be sure to include all of those links so people can get in touch with you and connect after listening. I'm so appreciative that you came by to tell us all about your books.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, one last thing before you go. Don't forget to grab your free guide to get your next chapter started today. Let's make this pipe dream of yours this year's reality. Pop on over to shaunalee.com/start again to grab your free guide.